Natsuki was a total loser trapped in memories from his teenage years that just wouldn't leave him alone. That bitter feeling of trying everything to fit in and still coming up short really stung. Getting rejected by the girl he loved had burned itself into his brain like proof that, yeah man, looks matter. Natsuki's biggest wish was simple, but impossible. A second shot at life. It all starts in 2021, and Natsuki was sitting there thinking about something that seemed kind of dumb on the surface. What's even the point of rewatching a movie? Like, you already know everything that's going to happen. Where's the fun in that? But that's exactly what he was doing. Watching a movie he hadn't seen since 7 years ago. In it, the main character traveled back in time to find the girl he loved. And as Natsuki sat there watching, something started slowly clicking into place. When you already know what's coming next, you see everything differently. You can actually spot what you should have done instead. And then the memory hit. High school. That pathetic version of himself, trying his hardest to be outgoing, and crashing and burning every single time. Natsuki's teenage years were gray, lifeless, dull. Out on the porch, cigarette in hand, he sat with his thoughts. From all those mistakes, he learned enough to land a decent graduation, a decent job, a decent life. And on paper, it looked like he should have been happy with that. But the regret never left. It just sat there, buried in his chest, haunting him. Those wasted years were something he could never let go of. Instead of all those gray years, Natsuki had only ever wanted to actually live his youth, full color, no regrets. He remembered the day he confessed to the girl he loved, and how coldly she shut him down. Looking up at the sky, almost like a prayer, his only wish was this: go back and fix everything. Then he opened his eyes, and he was on the floor. When he looked in the mirror, he saw the round, chubby face of his own teenage self staring back at him. Namika opened the door wearing a school uniform, and at first Natsuki figured it was some kind of costume thing, like cosplay. But wait, Namika was a sophomore in college. Why on earth would she be in a high school uniform? That's when it started clicking. Natsuki remembered the wish he'd made. Could it actually have worked? He asked Namika what year it was. 2014. Natsuki grabbed his phone, opened the calendar, checked everything carefully, and yeah, it checked out. Even so, he couldn't bring himself to believe it. He figured it had to be a dream, a really vivid dream. So he lay down on his bed, closed his eyes, and waited to actually wake up. Time passed. The sun started going down outside. Mizuki came into the room to wake her son up and congratulate him on his graduation, apologizing for missing the ceremony because of work. She noticed he looked kind of pale, maybe a fever. Either way, Natsuki just wanted to sleep until dinner. But when he woke up, he was still there. This was no dream. Standing in front of the mirror again, Natsuki made a decision. Trying to figure out how any of this had happened would just be a waste of time. He wasn't going to blow this chance. He was going to redo his entire teenage life, turn all those gray years into something actually vivid and alive. And the best part, he knew exactly what he needed to do. After all, he'd spent years replaying every mistake, every embarrassing slip-up, every cringeworthy moment. He knew what he should have done differently. He had 1 month before high school started. 1 month to become the best version of himself. In comfortable workout clothes, eyes full of determination, Natsuki got to work. Sitting on a bench, out of breath, completely wiped from pushing himself so hard, he admitted to himself that the teenage Natsuki would have quit right then and there. But this time was different. This time, that teenage body was carrying a mind 7 years more mature. There was no way he was going through those miserable years again. He wasn't going to give up. Not a chance. And he didn't. A month flew by in the blink of an eye. Now he was in shape, prepared, ready to relive his youth the way he always wanted to. That's when he ran into a classmate from school. Miori had gone to school with him since kindergarten, so she recognized him right away. But she stood there squinting, because something had changed. And it wasn't just the way he looked either. It was something else, hard to put into words. Something different was coming off of Natsuki. Miori said that even back when he was that chubby, boring nerd, she always saw something in him. And then she went ahead and added that the cool Miori from before wasn't really around anymore. Cool? He shot back. You were always kind of a brat. Miori was caught off guard for a second, but her little dog yanked her by the leash before she could fire back. Still, she managed to call out, excited, that they'd be going to the same school. First day of school. Natsuki walked in and every eye in the room landed on him, which was a little uncomfortable. He took a slow breath, let it out, and looked up. And there she was, Hikari, the beautiful girl he'd wanted so badly, and who had turned him down flat. The two locked eyes for a moment, but they were interrupted almost immediately after. It didn't matter. Natsuki had already set his new goal: win Hikari over and make her his girlfriend. While he was checking out who'd ended up in his homeroom, he heard a loud girl going off on the other side of the room. It was Uta, outgoing, a total chatterbox, the kind of person who fills every awkward silence without even trying. Next to her were two guys, Tatsuya and Reita. Reita caught Natsuki looking and quickly apologized for the two loud ones beside him. Natsuki just said, chill as ever, that he was actually kind of impressed by how well the three of them clicked. The three of them introduced themselves, and when Tatsuya got closer, Natsuki recognized him instantly. This was the guy who had humiliated him in the past. Tatsuya started throwing compliments at Natsuki about his physique. Then out of nowhere, a hand touched his abs. Obviously Uta. No shame whatsoever, getting a real close look at Natsuki's six-pack. When it was time to head into the classroom, Uta spotted Hikari and immediately pointed at her, completely blown away by how pretty she was, even walking right up to get a better look. Hikari was more than used to people gushing over her looks. Yuino, Hikari's best friend, launched into a whole thing about how popular and beautiful Hikari was. And that's when Natsuki saw the opening he needed. Yuino complimented Hikari, who brushed it off, drawing looks from everyone around them. How could a girl that gorgeous say something like that about herself? Natsuki jumped into the conversation, natural, not trying too hard. Hard to argue that you're not a beautiful girl. Hikari turned bright red, and Natsuki went pale with panic for having just let that slip out like that, without thinking. Yuino noticed her friend blushing, which was pretty unusual for someone so used to getting compliments, but it was a sign that the plan was actually working. When it came time for the class to introduce themselves, Natsuki was completely different. Night and day. Nothing like that humiliating moment from his past, when he tried to force himself to be the life of the party and ended up just embarrassing himself instead. A memory that still stung just thinking about it. The little group he'd just met invited Natsuki to check out some of the school clubs together. In the library, Hikari was chatting with a member of the literature club. How easily she connected with anyone confirmed something Natsuki already knew. Extroverts can get close to shy people with a natural ease that introverts will never have. At the basketball club, Hikari commented that Uta kind of acted like a little kid, probably because she was so all over the place. Uta took it the wrong way and thought it was a jab at her height and made it a whole dramatic thing. That's when Miori showed up and said hi to Natsuki. He froze up, terrified she was about to drag out some embarrassing story from his past, but she just said she could tell he was fitting in well. Miori glanced over at Reita with a little spark in her eyes, said he was cute, and pitched Natsuki a deal. She'd help him out with something, and in exchange he'd help her get with Reita. The whole group made plans to hang out on their free time, even if Uta's main agenda was obviously to set up a one-on-one with Hikari. When it was time to head out, Natsuki offered to walk with Hikari since she was heading home alone. On the way, the two of them decided to make a group chat to make it easier to stay in touch with everyone. Picking a name turned into a whole thing. Hoshimiya Fan Club? No, way too weird. Natsuki Fan Club? Even worse. Natsuki didn't even have fans. Natsuki Family, that's the one that stuck. Hikari swiped a photo of Natsuki to set as the group icon. Natsuki did the same thing right back, grabbing a photo of her on the spot. Hikari's fix was to just take a selfie of the two of them together. Then a message from Yuino popped up in the group chat. Stop flirting in the group chat. That was all it took for Hikari to want to disappear on the spot, and Natsuki smiled. The plan to finally have a colorful teenage life was starting to flow. At the end of the day, Natsuki gets a call from Miori. She wanted help digging up everything she could about that blonde guy she'd been eyeing, the whole thing they'd already talked about before. So the two of them meet up, and Miori looks Natsuki up and down with the face of someone who just witnessed a car crash. Like, who shows up looking like that to meet a girl? But it was literally the most decent outfit Natsuki owned. Miori's disappointment was written all over her face. Anyway, Natsuki was down to talk about Reita, but he wanted something in return, to hang out with that friend group like they'd agreed. He didn't even have to finish the sentence, because Miori already knew exactly what he needed: clothes. And honestly, what kind of disaster could that fashion sense of his cause if left unchecked? By nightfall, Natsuki walked out of the store feeling good, shopping bags in hand. He thanked Miori from the bottom of his heart. She was like, literally the only person who could have helped him with this. With Natsuki now part of Reita's crew, it would be way easier for Miori to get close to the blonde. In exchange, she promised to go all out for the nerd. She'd make him cool, help unlock the extrovert that was clearly trapped inside him, and even help him navigate the start of high school. Maybe even find him a girlfriend while she was at it. The group finally got together to hang out. Tatsuya, Yuino, Uta, Hikari, Reita, and last but not least, Natsuki. Everyone looking fresh, ready to have a good time. As they walked, Hikari struck up a conversation with Natsuki about his outfit. He hesitated for a second. Did he look ridiculous? But Hikari was just giving him a compliment. Natsuki returned it by saying she looked nice. And Hikari immediately called him out. Nice? Not pretty? She was just messing around, of course. She was obsessed with men's fashion, and if she spotted a piece she liked, she'd buy it without a second thought. She was happy Natsuki thought she looked nice, and all that adorableness straight up hit him right in the chest. First stop was a sports center. Hikari's idea. Uta's energy went through the roof. They started with ping pong. Hikari was quick to talk herself up, saying she was actually good at it, even if she was terrible at pretty much everything else. Tatsuya called her bluff immediately, ready to put it to the test. She shut that down fast. Tatsuya was way too intimidating, so Natsuki invited Hikari to play a chill, low-pressure match instead. And again, that thought crept into his head. She's so cute. Uta and Tatsuya were both killing it, two veterans of having fun. Hikari, on the other hand, was an absolute disaster at every sport, including the ping pong she'd just hyped herself up about. Natsuki caught on fast, but she'd rather make excuses. It was Yuino who just said it straight. Hikari simply wasn't good at sports. Natsuki was confused. If she was that bad, why suggest a sports center in the first place? The answer was simple. Even being terrible, she had a blast. And that was that. Hikari is so cute, man. That was the only thought running through Natsuki's head the entire day. Reita and Tatsuya went at it. Pure rivalry energy. In the end, Reita wiped the floor with Tatsuya and didn't even flinch. Tatsuya immediately called everyone over for the next game. Natsuki asked if they couldn't take a breather first. Tatsuya spun around with that frustrated look on his face. "We don't have time for breaks." Natsuki deflated on the spot, like a puppy getting scolded. Reita noticed the tension. Because honestly, Natsuki had never had this kind of friendship dynamic before. Everyone gathered for a toast to starting high school. Uta announced, beaming, that they were all real friends now. Hikari found that absolutely adorable and patted Uta on the head. Yuino did the same to Hikari, calling her cute. Hikari told him to cut it out immediately. Reita caught a moment alone with Natsuki to bring up something sensitive, Tatsuya. Natsuki was caught off guard. He didn't even have to say a word because his face gave everything away. Reita confirmed it just from the look. He'd noticed that Natsuki's energy drained every time Tatsuya was around. Natsuki admitted it was true and gave props to his friend's read on the situation. Reita had always been observant, the kind of guy who sees what's actually going on beneath the surface. He hadn't said anything before because he figured it was just a matter of the two of them not being close yet. But this time, he felt something different. He felt fear, and he was right. Natsuki tried to convince him the problem wasn't Tatsuya. It was something internal. That painful memory flashed through his mind for a split second. He asked Reita not to say anything to anyone. He'd try to work through it on his own. Reita agreed. It wasn't his business, and because of that, it wasn't his place to say a word. Reita said he trusted Natsuki, believed he could get through it, and in that moment, Natsuki finally understood why every girl was into Reita, and it had nothing to do with just his looks. Everyone rushed onto the empty basketball court, and nobody lost it harder than Uta and Tatsuya. It brought back memories for Natsuki, from his life in the other timeline. A lonely time, but one where basketball was his escape. He kept playing even when everyone around him acted like he didn't exist. In college, when he had nothing left, it was those shots that kept him going. And even after all that time without touching a ball, the skills never went anywhere. Natsuki sank the shot clean, in a moment that left everybody speechless. The guy was genuinely good. This time, Natsuki felt lighter. Uta jumped with excitement. "Why aren't you on a basketball team? You're a natural!" She turned to Tatsuya, expecting him to back her up. But he was frozen, expression dead serious. When Uta snapped him back to reality, Tatsuya smiled and said he'd just been caught off guard. He gave Natsuki his props. Genuinely incredible. Natsuki brushed off the idea of joining a team, said he had work to focus on. Tatsuya threw down a challenge. He wanted to test Natsuki's skills himself, one-on-one. Natsuki took a deep breath and thought back to his conversation with Reita. He accepted, saying it'd be fun. The time to face that fear was right now, and he was going to play with everything he had. Uta and Hikari screamed Natsuki's name, going all in with the hype. Tatsuya was a little salty about the lack of support on his end, but he rolled with it. Natsuki glanced over at Hikari. He wanted to play well. He wanted to show off for her. The game was on. Natsuki thought back to the basketball lessons Tatsuya used to give in the other timeline. He pulled the same move he'd learned back then and bucket. The crowd went crazy. Tatsuya pushed forward with the ball, but Natsuki could predict every single move. After all, he'd watched every play, every technique, every detail of Tatsuya's style for 3 years in that other timeline. He pulled off a slick dribble and bucket. Tatsuya came back serious. No more playing around. He was lightning fast and got on the board. Natsuki looked over at Hikari again. I can't let him win. Gotta show out. Gotta make this happen. And then the most important memory hit him. In the other timeline, everyone looked down on Natsuki, tried to intimidate the nerd. But there was one person who always shut that down. Tatsuya, the team captain, who wouldn't let anyone talk trash about Natsuki, not even behind his back. It was because of him that Natsuki managed to stick with the team all the way to the end. His teenage years were rough, but they would have been so much worse without Tatsuya there. And that gratitude, it ran deep, back to the game. Natsuki stripped the ball right out of Tatsuya's hands, just as he was about to score the final point. In that instant, he understood. The fear he'd been carrying wasn't really fear of Tatsuya. It was the fear of being hated by him. Natsuki jumped, released the shot, and bucket! Tatsuya got bodied. Game over. Uta was the first to absolutely lose it over Natsuki's win. Tatsuya held that blank stare for just a second, and then broke into a grin. The next day, Natsuki was working at a cafe, and man, that kid had an insane talent with food. A coworker couldn't stop raving about him. To her, it was practically unbelievable that this was the guy's first job. Starting off that strong, Yuino also worked there at the same cafe right beside Natsuki, and honestly, even she couldn't believe the level this guy was operating at. After all, Yuino spent a whole month learning what Natsuki picked up in 2 days. 2 days, dude. The thing is, Natsuki had already worked in this kind of environment in the original timeline, on top of studying cooking on his own, at home, in his free time. Then, out of nowhere, Tatsuya, Uta, and Reita showed up to pay a little visit. Natsuki didn't exactly look thrilled, but Yuino welcomed everyone with that warm smile of hers. Natsuki walked over to their table just to ask if they had come all the way there just to be a nuisance. He was clearly in a bad mood. He'd already seen that crew at school earlier, so he was kind of over it. Uta thought that was pretty rude and decided to soften him up a little. She asked if he was happy that they were friends, if he actually had fun when they hung out at school, and then Natsuki admitted it. Yeah, he was happy. Uta just had that way about her, you know? Of convincing people that having her around was a genuinely good thing. Those two get along so well, Yuino commented. The words lit Uta up instantly, and she asked to take a photo of the two of them. Actually, she ended up snapping one of everybody. The photo she sent to the group chat left Hikari making a face. She was the only one with other plans and couldn't make it. Left completely out of the loop, poor girl. Since Natsuki was the one making the food there, the gang decided to place an order, just to put his skills to the test. Spoiler, don't sleep on him. The plates arrived looking almost too good to eat. Everyone picked up their forks and took that first bite full of anticipation. Natsuki waited for the feedback with that serious expression of his. Uta was the first to lose it, eyes literally sparkling. Like that moment when you switch your dog from the cheap kibble to the premium stuff and he looks at you like you're an absolute god. Reita said he'd tasted Natsuki's cooking before, but it felt like this time he'd thrown in something extra. Chef's secret. Tatsuya loved it too. And Uta, of course, already wanted a bite of his plate. She opened her mouth waiting for Tatsuya to feed her. The poor guy turned red and, completely flustered, just shoved the plate toward her so she could eat it herself. Tatsuya even commented that Natsuki's skill level was wild, considering he'd only just started working there. But then midterms started creeping up, and poor Uta, the girl knew absolutely nothing and could not care less about class. Unfortunately for her, the exams at that school were no joke. A failing grade meant retaking the test, and not retaking it meant getting benched from the club. Big problem. Tatsuya thought it'd be a good idea to invite everyone out, but everyone was stressing over studying. Didn't happen. Reita asked Tatsuya if he was planning to just wing the exam without studying. And of course, Tatsuya already had a plan. He'd skimmed through a textbook the morning of. What a disaster. That's when Reita came up with the idea of organizing a study session to save those two from tanking their grades. Time to hit the books. The first step was figuring out what Uta and Tatsuya actually didn't understand, so they could try to salvage the situation. But it's tough to know what you don't know, right? Natsuki found himself watching Uta's cheerful attitude even through all of this. Then he glanced over and caught Hikari looking totally lost, and quietly gave her a hand. Hikari's gentle thank you was enough to make his heart do something embarrassing. Her smile was genuinely dangerous, man. Uta decided to test Natsuki's smarts. He actually paid attention in class, right? Natsuki offered to help her. Uta showed him the part she didn't understand and, yikes, that was entry-level stuff. Uta was teetering on the edge of a cliff. Natsuki walked her through it step by step, but they were so close together that the proximity just hung in the air, weird and oddly charged at the same time. Uta quickly pulled back, apologizing. Tatsuya watched all of that with a look on his face that said he would have preferred not to. After that, every single day the group would meet up to study after school. Tatsuya was spiraling. He didn't really care about a bad grade itself, but he did not want to get suspended from the club. He asked if they could study on weekends too. Uta made the same request, and offered to bring sodas as a thank you. Everyone agreed, but made it very clear the sodas were unnecessary. Uta said Natsuki was way too kind, but they were friends after all. Sometimes he said awkward things, but that honestly just made him cooler. Then Tatsuya pulled Natsuki aside with a serious look on his face, started talking about how close he and Uta had been getting, and asked point blank whether Natsuki had feelings for her. Of course it wasn't like that. Natsuki came right out and admitted he liked Hikari, and Tatsuya looked like a massive weight had just been lifted off his shoulders. Natsuki asked who Tatsuya liked then, but the guy wouldn't answer. On another study day, Natsuki showed up later than usual. The moment he walked in, the first thing he did was ask what Miori was doing there, but she had also come to study, along with another friend. Uta, ever the helpful one, had already saved Natsuki a seat, right next to Miori because hey, they were childhood friends after all. Totally uncalled for. Miori sat there watching Uta and Natsuki with that analytical gaze of hers. Natsuki pulled a little notebook out of his pocket that he'd put together for Uta, with simpler, more straightforward explanations. The clarity of those notes was impressive. The guy had barely slept putting it together, but honestly it wasn't that hard for him. In the other timeline, he used to tutor people. He had the experience. Uta promised she'd work hard to do well, so Natsuki's effort wouldn't go to waste. Miori took the chance to go ask her little blondie a question, and Natsuki almost blew her cover, but took a kick to the shin before he could finish the sentence. Message received. Miori pulled Natsuki quietly to the side and gave him a heads up. Lately, Uta hadn't stopped talking about him. The girl was turning into someone completely smitten, and Miori, being Miori, volunteered to set the two of them up as a couple. Natsuki started thinking about what that would even look like, but he didn't get far enough to reach a conclusion. Uta appeared out of nowhere asking what the two of them were whispering about. Natsuki brushed it off, saying they were talking about her, but only because he was curious about how she'd been doing at games. On the way home, Natsuki ended up alone with Miori on the train. Miori said she'd been watching him, that Natsuki's high school experience was going really well. He said that was the plan, to redo the dull, colorless teenage years and turn them into something full of life. Miori laughed. Whatever. But then the mood shifted. She pointed right at him and said there was an obstacle in his path, and that he still hadn't noticed it. Told him to figure it out himself. At home, Natsuki couldn't shake that comment. His phone rang. It was Hikari, wanting to talk. Nothing too serious. Hikari wanted to know if he'd noticed that Tatsuya had been seeming kind of down lately. Could just be her imagination, she said. Natsuki pushed back, said he hadn't picked up on anything weird, that it was probably just in Hikari's head. Exam day arrived at school. Tatsuya greeted Natsuki with a cold handshake, zero energy behind it. The exam week dragged on, and finally ended. Everyone free, screaming at a karaoke bar. Natsuki was a little restless on the inside. He loved karaoke, went all the time. But he'd never gone with friends before. This felt different. Uta launched herself at him saying it was his turn to sing. He accepted and picked a song. And then came the surprise. Uta and Natsuki's music taste was almost identical. So why not just sing together? The two of them stepped up to the front and, man, what a moment. Natsuki poured everything he had into his voice, turning it into something way more beautiful than anyone expected. Uta went quiet. Everyone went quiet, blown away. When it was over, everyone clapped. Everyone, except Tatsuya, who was frozen solid. Uta wanted more, called Natsuki over to put together a playlist together. But then Tatsuya cut everything short, slammed his fists on the table, stormed out of the room without much of an explanation. Natsuki went after him, tried to help. Tatsuya didn't want to talk, told Natsuki to just go, but Natsuki pushed. Tatsuya snapped at him to shut up, and then broke down saying he felt pathetic. Even more so after Natsuki showed up being the perfect guy at literally everything. He left asking Natsuki to forget the whole thing, said it wasn't his fault. Reita appeared then, with the face of someone who already saw this ending coming. Tatsuya was jealous of Natsuki. It all started with basketball, the one thing Tatsuya was genuinely great at, and Natsuki went and absolutely bodied him. Then came the insane cooking, the intelligence, the killer voice at karaoke, all of it making Uta more and more drawn to him. But what did Uta have to do with any of this? Natsuki was the only one who hadn't figured out that Tatsuya was in love with her. Man, Natsuki admired Tatsuya so much. All he wanted was to earn the guy's friendship, not trigger some jealousy spiral. But Natsuki still couldn't quite wrap his head around how Tatsuya really felt on the inside. Reading people's emotions had always been his biggest blind spot. Time flies, and Natsuki's new high school life was everything he'd ever wanted. That's why he'd prayed for it. He wanted a rainbow in that gray teenage wasteland. And the shift from a colorless youth to one full of life? It was actually going pretty well. Natsuki believed he was pulling it off, but things changed after Tatsuya's decision, and that vibrant rainbow slowly faded from the sky. By the time he got to school, he wasn't even saying hi to anyone anymore, and nobody knew what had happened with Tatsuya. The whole friend group fell apart without him around. Those were some rough days, no cap. Natsuki was losing the best version of his life all over again, slipping back to where he started. And that gray abyss? It was calling him home. A little while later, Natsuki and Uta were checking out the class rankings on the board. Natsuki was number 1, and thanks to him, Uta had managed to land at 110th. It wasn't great, but at least she stayed in the club. A couple of girls a little further away were whispering Natsuki's name, saying nice things, just not to him. Oh my god, his face is literally my type. And he's so smart. Natsuki is basically perfect. Uta invited Natsuki to hang out on Saturday, with this hopeful little smile. But Natsuki turned her down the second he remembered Tatsuya's jealousy over Uta. That feeling was way too heavy for him to ignore. Time to head home, and of course, it was pouring. Natsuki didn't even care. He walked out into the rain like he belonged in it, while regretting that prayer he'd made. In the end, nothing had changed. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of raindrops hitting an umbrella. It was Miori. She came over and offered to be there for him, because she could tell something was off. Natsuki wouldn't be this down in the dumps for no reason. Not him, but he didn't want help. At that point, nothing was going to fix anything anyway, and he stepped away from the umbrella. Miori at least carried his bag. She wanted to help. She was his childhood friend after all. The two walked together while she tried to figure out what was going on. That's none of your business. Yes, it is. I promised to help you build a colorful high school experience. Natsuki, completely checked out, had already given up on everything. He told Miori to drop that promise. He didn't need it anymore. Finally home, Natsuki stepped out of the shower, walked into his room, and found an intruder lying on his bed. Miori was looking around. That room hadn't changed one bit since she used to visit back in kindergarten, but she was there for a reason. She was reading one of Natsuki's nerd books, an absolutely unhinged one. Natsuki lunged at her to snatch back the source of his humiliation. She told that virgin to chill out, and just started snapping photos of his room. To commemorate the visit, apparently. Natsuki asked about basketball practice. Turns out Miori had ditched it, because unlike Uta, she wasn't exactly the kind of player who made a difference on the court. But anyway, none of that mattered right now. Miori brought up Natsuki's plan. Like, it was genuinely impressive that he was ranked first in the whole grade. He was actually taking the plan seriously. That plan was part of why Miori had skipped practice. But the real reason was Uta. She'd been acting weird. Miori tried to find out why, but Uta wouldn't say anything. And since half a piece of gossip is the worst thing in the world, Miori went straight to Natsuki. Plus, she wanted to help him, right? That's just the kind of person she was. Natsuki had lost faith in the plan. He was shaken, but he wasn't alone. Miori was there to ease that weight off his chest. She reached out and gently touched his hair, just like she used to when they were little kids. But Natsuki didn't let himself go there. He said he didn't want to be close to Miori anymore. She felt the sting of that, of not having been there for him in middle school, even though Natsuki was the one who had chosen to pull away back then. Seeing Natsuki like this brought back memories. She'd always been there, back when he was a total mess. Natsuki used to be terrible at everything. Miori understood his heart. She told him to just be who he actually was instead of playing the tough guy act. And then, Natsuki's tears started falling. The pain was finally leaking out, little by little. The next day, the mood was heavy. Natsuki walked into school and made his way straight toward Tatsuya. He wanted to have a little chat, somewhere private. The two of them headed up to the rooftop. Natsuki wanted to talk because they were friends, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Tatsuya had already asked to be left alone. Maybe it was better for everyone if he just kept his distance. Natsuki obviously didn't see it that way. Tatsuya was feeling jealous, and Natsuki didn't want that. They were friends. Pulling away wasn't the answer. Natsuki brought up Uta, and that's what made Tatsuya actually stay. Tatsuya was in love, had been for years. He had no idea how to get Uta away from Natsuki. He couldn't compete with him in anything, like even basketball, which was supposed to be Tatsuya's whole thing. He still lost even when he gave it everything he had. But Natsuki hadn't come up there to apologize, like Tatsuya expected. He came to read him for filth. Same way Miori had done to him. She'd slapped him with the truth. This whole situation was so stupid. This was on Tatsuya, because he had no business involving himself in Natsuki's relationships with other girls. The only move was to throw reality straight in his face. Natsuki went in and called Tatsuya a coward and an idiot straight up, blind for not seeing that nobody is perfect. Natsuki wasn't perfect, dude. He worked his butt off to have a decent high school experience. He did everything carefully and deliberately. It might have looked effortless, but it wasn't. Tatsuya had absolutely no reason to be jealous. He needed to face Natsuki head on, but Tatsuya didn't believe a word of it. He said Natsuki did everything with ease and came out perfect every single time. Natsuki threw it right back at him. Tatsuya was naturally outgoing, made friends like it was nothing, while Natsuki was drained by literally everything he tried to do. He pulled out his phone to show Tatsuya the truth, to shatter that fake image. He'd made this decision after Miori explained Tatsuya's side of things. Natsuki never let his flaws show, so of course people thought he was some kind of perfection god. He needed to show who he actually was. He was nervous, but he didn't hesitate. He shoved the screen into Tatsuya's face, a photo of a chubby Natsuki. Tatsuya still wasn't fully convinced, though he was definitely a little shaken. He put his finger on the screen and swiped, and there they were, anime girl characters, the kind that pull in guys exactly like Natsuki. And that dumb little detail was what finally got Tatsuya to believe him. Natsuki said how much he actually looked up to guys like Tatsuya. That hit Tatsuya hard. Being admired like that. Everything Tatsuya had been feeling toward Natsuki, Natsuki had been feeling the exact same thing toward him. The jealousy wasn't one-sided at all, so Tatsuya needed to come back to the group. And on top of that, he needed to stop playing it safe and go after Uta. Natsuki smirked. "Don't tell me you're scared to come at me directly." Honestly, Natsuki was the scared one. Tatsuya said Natsuki was being really bold for someone who looked like, well, that. And Natsuki got all in his feelings about it. He was way too easy to get to, poor guy. But that was the moment he finally said what he actually felt. How he was just keeping up an image. How he was an awkward, nerdy guy nobody would want to deal with. And how he'd been learning everything step by step, the hard way. They finally understood each other. The sun broke through the clouds over their friendship. But how was Tatsuya supposed to rejoin the group? Just show up out of nowhere like nothing happened? Natsuki said he'd have to tell the truth, word for word. "I've been totally into Uta-chan. And I got jealous because her and Natsuki got close. That was wild. So embarrassing." Some girl voices popped up from nearby, but they weren't ghosts, and they definitely weren't angels. It was 3 gossip girls and a wolf in sheep's clothing. Reita said he'd tried to stop them, but the girls wouldn't let up. They'd heard everything. Poor Tatsuya. Uta, embarrassed and worried at the same time, tried to let Tatsuya know she only saw him as a friend. Brutal words. Tatsuya's soul left the building after hearing that from the girl he loved. If Reita hadn't stopped Uta from saying more, there's no telling where Tatsuya's sanity would have ended up. Yuino also got stressed about something that was honestly a non-issue, the audacity. Then they exposed Natsuki's whole front, and now they wanted to see the photo he'd shown Tatsuya. It was an ambush. Tatsuya was down bad, but he pulled himself together just enough to throw Natsuki under the bus. The argument didn't get far thanks to Reita, the real one in the group. Tatsuya calmed down and told Uta that he wasn't giving up on her. Uta felt that. A warm feeling spread through her chest, and finally, the rainbow appeared after days and days of rain. After everything, Natsuki was thanking Miori at the cafe where she worked. Miori had been the reason Hope came back. She loved both versions of Natsuki. But don't read too much into that. That same night was a heavy one for Uta, who sat there thinking about Natsuki. The ache of knowing that the heart of the person you love already belongs to someone else.